Two new polls out from CBS and NBC News show most Americans do not approve of how President Trump is doing his job. It's a different story with this base. The CBS News poll pegging his approval rating among Republicans at 91%, though. The new polls coming as Trump puts his focus on deploying the National Guard onto the streets of D.C. while implementing hardline immigration tactics. CNN Chief Data Analyst Harry Enten is here to run the numbers on all of this, and we do have some fresh numbers today. So, Harry, what are they telling us?
Yeah, I think they're telling us what we know about the Trump presidency is that Americans don't like it. So why don't we just take a look at these new polling that we have, and he remains underwater. Look, the CBS News poll, look at that. He's 12 points underwater. You want to go over to NBC, you want a different network? You can go to a different network, but it's the exact same story. 14 points underwater, double digits on this. This has been the story throughout much of the Trump presidency. He remains underwater as we get past Labor Day, Jessica.
And just how consistent have Trump's ratings been?
Yeah, okay. So this to me was the fascinating thing because, you know, I come on either every Saturday or Sunday or sometimes like this weekend, both days, and I talk about, oh, Trump's approval rating, he's underwater. I come up with some witty line or some line I think is witty, like he's more underwater than the Little Mermaid or something like that. And I decided to actually look, okay, how long has this dude been underwater? All right, so let's take a look at it. All right, negative net approval rating for Trump. Every single day in my aggregate polls since March 12th, in terms of number of days, 180 days in a row he has been underwater. That is basically half a year. You know, the NFL season started this week. You basically have to go back to the end of the last NFL season to find a day in which Trump was above water. The bottom line is he has been swimming with the fishes for a very long period of time, Jessica.
And what groups has he lost ground with?
Okay, so, you know, we're talking about the fact that he was last positive. You got to go back before March 12th. So what has changed? What has changed since February, which was the last full month in which he was above ground? Well, take a look here. Trump's net approval rating among age 18 to 29. We're looking at the CBS News poll, but it holds true in the average as well. He was +2 back in late February. Look at where he is now. My God, that is a 32-point drop since the beginning of this year. How about Hispanics? He was at -6, a little bit underwater, but not too bad. But look at where he is now, -34 points. That's what is that? That's a 28-point drop since February. These, of course, were two groups that he exceeded expectations with back in the 2024 election, did much better than the traditional Republican has this century. But now these groups have absolutely moved away from him, and he is way underwater, 30 points and 34 points underwater. Those two groups have moved away from him in tremendous fashion, and it goes a long way in explaining why his overall approval rating, his net approval rating, has fallen through the floor and been negative for such a long period of time, Jessica.
And what issues does he do well with?
Okay, so there are a few things that I think that are so important to figure out here. Okay, so we're talking about groups, right? Is there any place where Donald Trump does well with? Well, let's talk about issues first. Okay, Trump's net approval rating. I got crime, immigration, foreign policy, the economy, trade. There's a whole slew of red, and this isn't Republican red. This is negative red, Jessica Dean. -2 points, -3 points, -12 points, -14 points, -17 points. On all the key issues of the day, he is underwater, Jessica. No wonder you can't survive in a presidency having a positive net approval rating when you're underwater on all of these different issues. And, of course, crime and immigration were two of his best issues, and now he's underwater on all of them. And then, of course, the economy, which was the reason he was reelected in the first place. This is the one I really circle here. He's 14 points underwater, which basically looks pretty much like those CBS News and NBC News polls, which have him at -12 and -14 points. I'll point out one last little thing. I'm going to jump ahead a question because I just feel like I'm in such a roll, Jessica Dean. I just feel like the energy with me.
Don't let us stop you.
Thank you very much. So we see all this negative, but the thing that you pointed out at the beginning that I think is so important, what is the one saving grace for Donald Trump right now? And that is the Republican base. What are we talking about here? Well, take a look here. Republicans who approve of Trump. Well, in the CBS News poll back in February, look at this. It was 90%. Look at where it is now. You mentioned it at the top. It's at 91%. As long as this Republican base sticks with him, as long as he's hearing the good news from the conservative talk radio host, as long as he's hearing the good news from the folks out there on the right, he's going to think he has very strong support. So I don't think that Donald Trump is going to do anything differently as long as this 91% holds. And as I said, it's steady as ever, because that's actually a point higher than it was in February, Jessica.
All right, Harry Enten, running the numbers as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let's bring in CNN senior political commentators David Urban and Van Jones. David is a Republican strategist. Van worked for the Obama administration, and they've both held numerous other positions since then, but that at least gives you a good working idea. David, let's start first with you. Sometimes I have to prompt you with a whole question, but Harry just went through a lot of data. What did you think about all that?
Yeah, listen, so Harry's great at that. And what he didn't tell you, though, and what Harry would admit to, is that Donald Trump's ceiling, ever since he's been a candidate, has been 44%. That's the number in that YouGov poll that just came out this morning. The CBS YouGov poll is at 44%. By the way, that's up 2% since the last poll in July. And so he's consistently polled that 44% approval rating. And so, you know, that's kind of where he was at when he won the election in 24. It's where he's been at consistently. And as Harry points out, he's up a percentage point with Republicans. And so I don't think that, you know, that Rome is burning here. I think that Trump is continuing to do what he did. He's delivering on the messages that on the immigration and cracking down on crime that won him the election in 24, and he's being rewarded among the base for it.
What do you think, Van?
Well, look, I think that if I were Republicans, I'd be worried about that Latin number. They scared the living bejeebers out of us in November when you saw this stampede of brown voters rushing to Donald Trump. We said, holy crap. And that was the whole ball game. And then you got a bunch of young people as well. And so that's why you've seen the therapy bills for Democrats going through the roof, because we had this fantasy that we were always going to be the party of black, brown, and young voters. And suddenly we're just the party of African-American voters, and even we didn't come out as strong as we usually do. Trump could have kept all that if he had done what he said he was going to do on immigration. He said he was going to go after the bad folks. And listen, I live in Los Angeles. There's some people who need to get the heck out of this country. But they're not nannies. They're not people who work, you know, who stand around Home Depot trying to get a day laborer job. When he started going after just everybody's kind of working class cousin, it just, the floor fell out from under him. And I'm telling you, as somebody who lives in Los Angeles, there are a lot of people, and now listen, he has a lot of support in some parts of the country. But in parts of the country where working class Latin folks thought he was going to go get the bad guys and they went and got their cousins, he's in real trouble.
David, do you think, just again, putting aside the 91% approval rating with Republicans, but to Van's point, we saw those numbers with Harry, the younger voters and the Hispanic voters that are dropping off from supporting the president. Is it because he's gone too far on some of these issues, like what Van's talking about?
Yeah, look, I don't know if it's that, Jessica, or if it's economic issues. Because if you look in those polls, right, people are feeling it in their pocketbook. Those polls say that, you know, that they're not feeling better about the economy. They're concerned about their future. There's a report out today that I noted that auto loan defaults, prime and subprime auto loan defaults, are at historic all-time highs. So when you can't pay, you know, when you have money short, right, in your pocketbook,
yeah.
You're paying your rent, you're paying for your food. What are you going to let slip? You're probably going to let you slip your car. So it's kind of the canary in the coal mine as to what's going on. And so I think the challenge for this administration in this upcoming midterm election is to deliver on those economic promises that people talk about sitting around their table every night, whether or not they could pay the rent, pay their bills, you know, buy some new school clothes for their kids. Those are the things that people are talking about in America and want to see addressed. And that's the challenge this president and this administration face. How do you make life better for real people? And you're going to have a referendum on that in these midterms. If you can't turn that feeling around, Republicans are going to be in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, because Van, that was a huge, in addition to the immigration and the crime stuff, people were really concerned about the economy in this last election.
Yeah, it's true, and you know, it's always hard. You know, if things go well, the president gets the credit. They go bad, the president gets the blame. The problem is the president did promise a lot. He said we're going to have the best economy ever, and there's a particular weakness that you have, and frankly, Democrats have no answer for this either. These young voters that graduated off of a cliff, the last two graduations, where you had so many college graduates who did the right thing, they did their homework, they stayed out of trouble, at least they didn't get in so much trouble, they got thrown out of school. and then they graduate and they get a picture with their grandma and no job, and then they still don't have a job. That is the base for a lot of discontent in the country, and frankly, Democrats and Republicans have great answers. But if you look at here, right now I'm in New York City, the entire New York mayoral race is being turned upside down by these disappointed college graduates who are under the age of 30 who said, I did what you told me to do, and there's no job for me. I could have literally stayed at home like my ne'er-do-well cousin and played video games and been in a better position. I'm mad as hell. That is something both parties are going to have to deal with, but Trump is losing those voters by the bushel.